Hiya history buffs, and welcome back to the channel. This is the first in hopefully a new series where I will briefly explore the events that occurred on this day in history. Although it will be Tudor history, so don't start commenting me Victorian dates. I might get onto that in like 3 decades time when I've had enough of the Tudors, but I don't think that will ever happen. So today we will be diving into the last letter of Sir Thomas More, which was written in coal while he was imprisoned in the Tower of London. Thomas More was born on the 7th of February 1478 to parents Sir John More and his wife Agnes. Thomas was the second of 6 children, and he was educated at what was considered one of the best schools in London, St. Anthony's. And he would eventually go on to study at Oxford, where he qualified as a lawyer. As a child, More spent some time in the household of John Morton, Archbishop of Canterbury. It would be thanks to Morton that More would get his place at Oxford, as Morton saw great potential in the young boy. Morton and his preachings of the faith must have had a great influence on the young More, as he contemplated leaving his legal career and becoming a monk. Even though he didn't become a monk, More was still quite pious and devout to his faith, as he would continue certain practices for the rest of his life, such as wearing a hair shirt. But ultimately, More would marry in 1505 to Joanna or Jane Colt, and according to Erasmus, More tutored his wife in music and literature. He is quite clearly a man that holds both faith and education in high regard, and this is something we will see throughout his life and in his published works. Family life, career, and eventual imprisonment. More would go on to be a passionate defender of the Catholic faith, writing pamphlets against heresy and banning unorthodox books. He and Jane would go on to have 4 children: Margaret, Elizabeth, Cecily, and John. Just like he had with his wife, Thomas More provided his children with a superb education, and his daughters received the same classical education as his son John. His eldest daughter Margaret achieved much praise for her fluency in both Greek and Latin. His wife Jane would die in 1511, and Thomas More would remarry with ridiculous speed. 30 days later, he wed Alice Middleton. The speed of the marriage meant that More had to get a dispensation from the Pope, which was granted, although this union would not produce any more children. In 1515, More wrote The History of Richard III, which arguably was a propaganda piece, as it portrays the former king as a tyrant. Ricardians, don't come for me, okay? Which he may well have been, but you've got to remember that this was written during the reign of King Henry VIII, the son of the king who only 3 decades earlier usurped King Richard III, so it's still in living memory for many. In 1516, he released his most significant work, Utopia, which depicted an ideal republic governed by reason, serving as a stark contrast to the reality of 16th century European politics. A year later, he would enter the service of the king, King Henry VIII, rising through the ranks to become one of King Henry VIII's most reliable and valued civil servants, and acting as his secretary, interpreter, speechwriter, chief diplomat, advisor, and confidant. More was knighted for his service to the king in 1521, and in 1523 he became the Speaker of the House of Commons, and 2 years later he was appointed Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Assuming the position of Lord Chancellor in 1529, More stepped into the role at a pivotal moment, coinciding with Henry's pursuit of an annulment from Catherine of Aragon. I can't say divorce because that one person in the comment will get really pissy with me. Actually, do you know what? He wanted a divorce. His predecessor, Cardinal Wolsey, had failed in achieving an annulment. As Henry edged closer to severing ties with the Church of Rome and the Reformation Parliament prepared to assemble, More found himself at a crossroads. When Henry proclaimed himself the supreme head of the Church of England, a move that led to the establishment of the Anglican Church and facilitated the annulment of his marriage, More had to make the difficult decision to resign from his chancellorship. After resigning from the chancellorship, More tried to live a quiet life with his family, but he was too well known and too well regarded to be forgotten. King Henry VIII knew that if he could convince More to accept the controversial Reformation, he would have more of a chance at convincing others. It should be noted that although More did refuse to swear the oath of allegiance, he did not have issue with Parliament shifting the line of succession to the heirs or potential heirs of Henry and Anne Boleyn. His issue was far more religious, which he explains in his letter to his daughter Margaret. More could not bring himself to recognise his friend, Henry, as the new supreme head of a new Church of England. His allegiance in matter of faith belonged to the Pope. As a result, More was sent to the Tower of London in April 1534. More would be imprisoned for over a year. Henry had hopes that imprisonment would change More's mind. I feel like Henry has his hands tied because he's made this massive decision and his friend isn't supporting him. And Henry's like, mate, please just say you approve. And More is sat there like, nope, sorry, what are you going to do about it? To the point that Henry then just gets frustrated and executes what he sees as a lost cause. With the slight bit of humour and abbreviation aside, the fact that Henry tries for over a year to get More to convert and gives him that time to change his mind speaks volumes, especially when we look at some of the other executions that Henry had ordered, such as that of his wife Anne Boleyn a year later. That was done with great haste. On this day, the 5th of July, 1535, More explained to his dear daughter Margaret, or Meg, Roper, in his last letter that, although he would not deny to swear to the succession, he could not swear the oath, as he feared he would be jeopardizing his soul to perpetual damnation. His refusal had been seen as an act of treason, and was eventually charged with high treason at Westminster on the 1st of July, 1535. Thomas More pleaded not guilty to all of the charges laid against him. But despite his incredible defence, remember, he was a lawyer, he was found guilty and sentenced to a traitor's death, which was then changed to beheading by an axe, a kindness that was afforded to him because of his friendship and service to the king. On this day in 1535, the day before Sir Thomas More was executed, he wrote a final letter to his daughter Margaret. The letter was written with a piece of coal on pieces of paper or cloth that he could obtain by stealth, as King Henry VIII had ordered his books and writing materials to be removed. This is what he wrote. My good daughter, our Lord bless you, good daughter, and your good husband, and your little boy, and all yours, and all my children, and all my godchildren, and all our friends. Recommend me, when you may, to my good daughter Cecily, whom I beseech our Lord to comfort, and I send her my blessing, and to all her children, and pray her to pray for me. I send her a handkerchief, and God comfort my good son, her husband. My good daughter, Daunce, hath the picture in parchment that you delivered me from my lady Conyers. Her name is on the back side. Show her that I heartily pray her that you may send it in my name again for a token from me to pray for me. I like special well Dorothy Colley. I pray you be good unto her. I would wit whether be she that you wrote me of. If not, I pray you be good to her as you may in her affliction, and to my good daughter Joan. To give her, I pray you, some kind answer, for she sued hither to me this day, to pray you be good to her. I cumber you, good Margaret, much, but I would be sorry if it should be any longer than tomorrow, for it is St. Thomas even, and the vigil of St. Peter, and therefore tomorrow long I to go to God. It were a day very meet and convenient for me. I never liked your manner towards me better than when you kissed me last, for I love when daughterly love, and dear Charity hath no leisure to look to worldly courtesy. Farewell, my dear child, and pray for me, and I shall for you and all your friends, that we may merrily meet in heaven. I thank you for your great cost. I send now unto my good daughter Clement her algorism stone, and I send her and all my good son and all her God's blessing and mine. I pray you at this time convenient recommend me to my good son John Moore. I liked well his natural fashion. Our Lord bless him and his good wife, my loving daughter, to whom I pray him be good, as he hath great cause, and that if the land of mine come to his hand, he break not my will concerning his sister Daunt's. And our Lord bless Thomas and Austin, and all that they shall have. Okay, let's break down who he mentioned in this letter, as some of them aren't as clear as you would assume upon your first read. So first is Meg. As we've already covered, this was his nickname for his eldest daughter, Margaret Roper, and is also the person he is writing to. Meg and her father were close, and I can imagine she was grateful for the high standard of education that he provided her. After her father's execution, she would retrieve his head from a pike on London Bridge. Then we have Cecily, another one of More's daughters. His good daughter Daunt's is his daughter Elizabeth, who had married William Daunt's in 1525. Dorothy, who he wishes you be good unto her, was his daughter Margaret's maid. In the last letters of Thomas More, editor Alvaro de Silva explains that Joan was another maid who likely grew up with Margaret and her sisters, and attended the school that More ran at home in Chelsea. Then we have the mention of John More, who was Thomas More's only son and heir. And then at the end of the letter, Thomas More mentions, Our Lord bless Thomas and Austin. These were Sir Thomas More's grandchildren, through his son John. They were born in 1531 and 1533 respectively, so they would have been 4 and 2 at the time of writing. And finally, the good daughter Clement refers to More's adoptive daughter, Margaret Clement. More adopted Clement as a playmate for his daughter Meg, as he was impressed with her intelligence and piety. Clement was educated alongside More's daughters and was the only person from his household to see his execution. Notably, Thomas does not mention his second wife Alice in the letter. However, he may not have needed to if she was present when he wrote the letter, or if he had already had the chance to say his goodbyes. It is rather unlikely that Thomas omitted her for lack of love, as he did marry her less than a month after the death of his first wife Jane, but unfortunately I can only provide speculation with this. Seymour Baker House supports this argument, saying that More had once written that he could not tell which was dearer to him, the wife who bore their children, or the wife who raised them. Sir Thomas More would be executed the next day, the 6th of July 1535, at the age of 57. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, have a wonderful day.